My graduate thesis topic is the self-efficacy and the player performance under two different DDA game environments. Video game self-efficacy is an individual's belief in a person's gameplay skill and willpower to execute a game task. The higher self-efficacy means the better performance. Dynamic difficulty adjustment is a game design pattern. The game difficulty depends on the player's real-time performance. In the game design, the depth is the variation of the gameplay, and the complexity refers to the categories of the game elements which players need to memorize and understand. Under the game environments of the depth and complexity DDA patterns, which one can enhance the player's self-efficacy? Which version can make the players have the better results and the stabler performance? The overall research method is quantitative. I create a 2D single-player casual game about grabbing the good apples and dodging the bad apples within the 5 minutes. Players need to get the score as high as possible and keep the high scores until the end. In the depth DDA group, both speed and amount of bad apples will changed according to the actual scores of the players. And for the complexity DDA group, new elements will be introduced during the process, and the amount of the bad apples will still changed according to the current scores of the players. There are total 34 participants in this experiment. And 15 of them from the depth group and 19 of them from the complexity group. As for the self-efficacy variation, both groups' players' self-efficacy of getting the high scores were finally weakened after they actually playing the game, but the players from the depth group were less negatively impacted on. In other words, the variations of the self-efficacies of getting the higher scores in the depth group were almost the same. The overall performance indicates the average final scores of participants in each group. In this case, the average scores of complexity DDA group was a little bit higher than that of the depth DDA group. The primary reason is the complexity group contains more players having the higher scores, especially for the players having the 100 points. As for the overall fluctuations of player performance, based on the results on the line charts and the box plot, the players in the depth DDA group has the has a stabler performance, has a stabler overall performance, because the standard deviations of the complexity group is higher than the standard deviation of the depth group. As for some interesting findings and conclusions, as for the self-efficacy variation and the player's performance, the master experience is the primary resource to impact on the self-efficacy, but the process is more important than the results, because some of the players in the depth group who finally got the lower scores, but their self-efficacies were still enhanced because they actually mastered at the gameplay and they really enjoying the challenging process. And as for the conclusion, for the future DDA design, game designers should focus on the depth, which means the variations of the gameplay, and they should also reduce the unnecessary complexity. And that's it. This is my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.